Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks. U19 World Championships in basketball were going on over these last couple weeks. On last week's show, we talked about Mikel Brown Jr., we talked about Dybantsa, we talked about Koa Peat. And what I would say is a couple things. I think, first of all, there's going to be some of you saying, Torres, why are you talking about this? What I'll tell you is I watched the gold medal match on Sunday afternoon. There were 65,000 people live streaming that gold medal match. By the way, when I was driving to the beach on Friday, 38,000 people were watching Team USA versus Canada in the quarterfinals on July 4th. So you guys care. And as I've said a million times, I think this is kind of a great little July precursor to college basketball because you have so many stars that are going to be in college basketball playing in this event. Omari Johnson Jr. headed to Michigan. Jasper Johnson headed to Kentucky. Koa Peat headed to Arizona. Dybantsa, Mikel Brown Jr. So what I want to do is break down everything you missed. I actually watched most of Team USA and what it means for the season ahead. First of all, credit Team USA. They do get the gold. They actually set a record for points per game scored. I think it was about 114 points per game. Really, outside of Canada in the quarterfinals, they really were not tested. So Team USA with, again, Mikel Brown Jr., Jasper Johnson, on and on, takes home gold. Now, let's get to some takeaways and what it means for the 2025-2026 college hoop season, because boy, oh boy, do I have a few. First big takeaway, it's this. Mikel Brown Jr., point guard, headed to Louisville. That guy is an all-American candidate. Okay, so we talked about Mikel Brown Jr. We did a full kind of rundown on him, a full segment on him last week. And I used the old Shaq meme. I was not familiar with your game because I knew Mikel Brown Jr. was good. I liked his game, but I did not realize how good this kid is. And I thought he was the best player for Team USA, probably the best player in the tournament. I know Dybantsa got the MVP. I think a lot of people thought it should have been Mikel Brown Jr. Bottom line is a couple things. One, the stats back it up. Led Team USA in scoring just under 15 points per game, 6 assists, shot 47% from three, which I think is kind of one of the big things that not enough people talk about, is the fact this kid's a great three-point shooter, gets others involved. But I think the thing that really stood out to me, I'm still seeing these articles, recap articles, this and that are listing him at 6'2", 6'3". This kid he's got to be about 6'5", okay? And he is a big guard. He gets to all his spots. The story on him coming out of high school was that he grew like 6 inches over like a 2.5-year period. I think he's grown another inch or two probably since the McDonald's All-American game, and he just completely dominated. I think the thing that's interesting about him, we'll get to Dybantsa and Koa Peat in a minute, is the last 2 games, and really several of the games, Team USA dominated in such a fashion that the starters didn't really have to play a ton of minutes, and the numbers were probably a little bit deceptive in terms of Mikel Brown Jr. and all these guys probably just didn't play as much as they actually could have, and because of it, the stats weren't even as good as people. They look good on paper. They were probably even better considering kind of a minutes per game, production per minute kind of deal. So Mikel Brown Jr. to me was the best player on Team USA, the best player in the tournament. And it's funny because we have somebody in the comments asking me pretty much every episode, Torres, do an ACC preview. Who is your ACC preseason player of the year? Is it Cam Boozer at Duke? Is it Darian Williams at NC State? I think Mikel Brown Jr. has to be in the short mix, in the short conversation for ACC preseason player of the year. He was that good. And I said it last week. I think he changes the trajectory of both Louisville in the ACC and Louisville on the national level. I had him as a fringe top 10 team, and that was mostly on the returnees and the transfer portal additions. You add a kid that I think could be an All-American and an All-ACC first-team member to that in Mikel Brown Jr., I think it changes the entire trajectory of Louisville. So Mikel Brown Jr. does not win MVP, but to me, he looked like a guy that will be one of the best point guards in college basketball. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the next couple minutes. Cannot wait to watch that kid play college basketball, though. Mikel Brown Jr., takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2. I would argue that AJ Dybantsa and Koa Peat were probably the two most high-profile players on this Team USA team. Let me say this. Both were as good as advertised. I think they were, frankly, in many ways better than advertised. With Dybantsa, it's funny. There was a little bit of criticism of should he have won Player of the Year, MVP of the tournament. He finished his second on the team in scoring 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists. I think what was noteworthy, took 50 free throw attempts. And I think if you watch the games, a couple things stood out about Dybantsa. One, can get to the line anytime he wanted. The shot wasn't falling. We'll get to that in a minute. But every time that he needed to get to the rim, every time Team USA needed points on the board, he could just get to the rim, get to the foul line, and shot like 84% from the free throw line, taking 50 free throws over the course of the tournament. So this guy physically is dominating. I thought defensively played his butt off. I remember talking about this during his recruitment. Is there's so many guys that I think in the high school ranks, they just fall in love with the offensive side of things, fall in love with shooting, fall in love with scoring. Dybantsa really does compete on both ends of the court, and I thought he was phenomenal, especially defensively. Now, what's crazy about Dybantsa, averaged 14.3 points per game, second most on the team, won the MVP of the tournament, and I think you can argue indisputably did not play his best basketball. I think that's a great compliment. It sounds like it isn't, but it actually is, because a couple things. One, as mentioned with Mikel Brown Jr., the starters really, for most of these games, did not play big minutes because Team USA kind of ran away with things. So Dybantsa, Mikel Brown Jr., Koa Peat easily could have averaged more points, more stats, more whatever, and just didn't get the chance to play. The other thing with Dybantsa, I mentioned it, the shot was not falling. 2 of 18 from 3 in the tournament. I think a lot of people would see that as a negative. Again, I'm not sitting here saying I watched every single second of every single game. But in watching the tournament, I did watch most of it. And seeing Dybantsa, I didn't see anything that looked wrong with the shot. The form looked good. The shot just didn't fall. And so the one thing I can say pretty definitively, this kid ain't going to shoot 11% from 3, at BYU. I think he's a 35 to 40% three-point shooter this year at BYU at the college level. And so I just bring it up because even if he shoots like 33% instead of 11%, we're now talking about 16, 17 points a game as opposed to 14. So he was excellent. He was as good as advertised. I'm excited to see him this year at BYU. And we also got to talk that gentleman on the screen right here, Koa Peat, who is headed to Arizona. Really interesting story with Koa Peat. I think, it's funny. He's been in the spotlight. He's been kind of the top 3, 4, 5 players in this class basically since he was in 8th, 9th grade. And I kind of feel like he was a guy that probably has not gotten enough credit for how good he is. And it's because the rise of AJ Dybantsa, the rise of Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer is awesome. But Koa Peat also played his senior year with a broken hand, okay? So obviously he was not at his best, still led his high school to a 4th straight state championship. It's kind of funny. I think like Mikel Brown Jr., they both played on the Adidas circuit in high school. It's no disrespect to the Adidas circuit people, but I'm just here to say, I think most of the national media goes to Peach Jam, so you don't see the Adidas guys as much. And Koa Peat, to his credit, he stayed at his local high school. He didn't go to Montverde. He didn't go to IMG. And so I think he kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I thought this was a great moment for him, a great event for him to kind of say, you know what, guys, I'm still pretty freaking good. Put some respect on my name. 12 points, 7 boards per game. Another guy who easily could have produced more if needed. I thought he was one of the best players in the tournament. He's as good as advertised. A couple more takeaways from Team USA. One, Morez Johnson Jr. Okay, so Morez Johnson Jr., I just think he's way better than people, and I even sort of include myself, way better than people realize. Okay, so this was a kid, we talked about him a lot during portal season. He was at Illinois last year, okay? And during his time at Illinois, I frankly thought was kind of misused by Brad Underwood. And it's not a disrespect. I'm not saying that I have all the answers and the coaches are idiots. But you watch and he just competed and he played hard and he this and he that. Now, he dealt with some injuries. Illinois kind of had all sorts of weird injuries last year. But he transfers, he commits to Michigan. And I'll be honest, even somebody like me, I've spent so much time talking about Yaxel Lendenberg and some of the other guys that they got. Morez Johnson Jr. is awesome. Averaged 9.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game in the tournament, 15 points, 10 rebounds in the gold medal game. This is a guy that I think could be like an all Big Ten first team type player. And that is in a front court with Yaxel Lendenberg, who I said earlier in the spring, I think he could be National Player of the Year. This is Yaxel. And so you look at what Dusty May did last year with Vlad Golden, Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf was kind of the playmaker. Vlad Golden was kind of the guy in the paint. I think Morez Johnson Jr. takes over that Vlad Golden spot. I think Yaxel Lendenberg takes over the Danny Wolf spot. Remember, by the way, Danny Wolf was a first-round pick. And so I look at that team. I look at what Morez Johnson Jr. did, and I kind of sort of believe that he is underrated. And in turn, I think a lot of people have Michigan underrated as well. I've said I think they can win a national championship. It's going to come down to Elliot Cadeau, but Morez Johnson Jr. just way, way, way better than people realize. Let's keep it going. One other takeaway-ish from Team USA. Jasper Johnson is going to get buckets for Kentucky this year, okay? So it's funny because I put this out on Twitter. And when I did, Aaron_Torres, I had a lot of people say, oh, Torres, you're just hyping him up because he's a Kentucky guy. No, I'm not. Jasper Johnson was good. Played off the bench, averaged 8 points per game. I'm not going to say he was better than Mikel Brown Jr. because he wasn't. But here's the thing. Jasper Johnson right now is probably like the fourth guard at Kentucky. Like, let's have an honest conversation about Jasper Johnson, okay? You have Jalen Lowe. You have Otega Owe. You have Denzel Aberdeen. You don't need Jasper Johnson to be great. This is not 2013 under John Calipari where if the five-star freshman doesn't click, the whole season falls apart. He's going to be your fourth guard. And oh, by the way, if he's not your fourth guard, that means he's probably even better than people realize. So 8 points per game, shot 40% from three at a couple. I love the step back. I love the floater. I think he is going to produce offensively. And again, he is probably going to do it as the first or second guard off the bench. You don't need him to average 19 a game. He can develop in his role. He can get back to campus. He can get with the older guys. I think he's going to be really good. And I think when you're talking about him as a sixth or seventh man, you are in great shape if you're Kentucky. Really quickly, let's get to some of the international takeaways. And I'll say this. I think this is a really cool element of where we are in college hoops because of NIL. Now these international players come over and play college basketball rather than staying overseas. We had a couple big name international guys playing in this event. The first one that stood out to me, Omari Mayor. Okay, he is headed to Purdue. So here's the deal with this kid. He committed kind of early in the portal cycle, and there was so much going on with the portal stuff. We didn't talk about him. And so you kind of sit there and you're like, okay, really good, decorated international player, played overseas, played internationally, all that good stuff. And you kind of forgot that he was just there, especially because, oh, by the way, Purdue's bringing back Braden Smith, and you kind of just don't think a ton about him. Well, I bring it up because he was awesome in this tournament. 18 points per game, 4.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 steals. And again, there were a couple games for Israel where he kind of just took over. 6'4", 6'5" guard, gets to his spots, finishes at the rim, mentally tough, physically tough. And it's funny because I watched him. I think he can be a contributor right away in the Big Ten next year. Now, the thing is, again, you have Braden Smith. Thought it was interesting. I think it was Bet Online put out way too early Wooden Award odds. In other words, National Player of the Year in college basketball. They had Braden Smith as number one on that list. So I just bring it up because you don't need this kid to be great. And I think he's kind of viewed as the heir apparent to Braden Smith. He'll come play backup. I think Matt Painter is going to have trouble keeping him off the court. I just loved every single thing I saw about him. The competitiveness, the toughness was awesome for that Israeli national team. I am very excited to watch this kid next year. I think he's going to be really good in college basketball. Another takeaway from the international side, sort of an international, but sort of a U.S. thing as well. Washington had two guys playing in this event, one for the German national team. Germany was the silver medalist behind Team USA that won the gold. But Hans Steinbach was their star player. And oh, by the way, JJ Mandaquit, who played for Team USA, both those guys are going to Washington, okay? And it's funny, I don't remember the last time that we talked about Washington basketball on the Aaron Torres pod. I think it was when Great Osabor committed last spring, and I said, I don't think that's going to work out well. It doesn't. They finished in 18th place. But this year in the portal, they add Des Claude, they add Wesley Yates. But the two guys that played in this event were awesome. Steinbach is a guy that I don't think most people knew as much about as some of these international guys. 17 points, 13 rebounds, a block and a half per game for Germany on the way to the silver medal. As much as I love Eric Reiba, who's headed to Yukon, this kid, Steinbach, was their best player on Germany. And then JJ Mandequit, man, he's just one of those kids that like almost reminds me like a Peyton Pritchard, like savvy point guard, does all the right things. He was part of the Team USA last year with not only Koa Peat and AJ Dybantsa, but also Cam Boozer and a couple others. And so I only bring it up because Mandequit was awesome in this event. And I just think he's one of those point guards that is going to be very good in college early. He is going to be great as time goes on. I think Washington has a chance to be a tournament team this year. They should be much improved in year 2 under Danny Sprinkle. All right, there's one more takeaway. It involves Yukon. And producer Matt, this is where you can go ahead and cut the clip because I want to go a little bit longer on Yukon. Let's dive into and by the way, if you're a Yukon fan, check out the solo Yukon clip if you're looking for Yukon in this specific clip, blah, 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 blah. All right, let's dive into my final takeaway, and that's this. Yukon had 2 players in this U19 World Cup event. Neither played for Team USA. They had 2 players that are going there next year. Eric Reiba, who, he's a little bit of an interesting story because he's from Germany. He played on the German national team that finished with the silver medal, but he actually played basketball in the U.S. in high school this past year. He's committed to Yukon. Also, Jacob Furphy played for the Australian team. And, I'll say this about Yukon is that I was watching this event, and I think that, we talk so much about Yukon this offseason, and we're going to talk about them here right now, but I just bring it up because I think basically the assumption with these two, I'll just be transparent and we'll work our way backwards, is that I think Eric Reiba, we all just thought, okay, going to be the backup center to Terrace Reed. Whatever you get from him, that's great. Almost like a Donovan Clingan in his freshman year behind Adama Sanogo, but the season is going to be made or broken by him. And then I'll be honest, Yukon fans might tell you different. Yukon fans might disagree. I had zero expectation for Jacob Furphy. 8th, 9th, 10th man, probably not going to play that much. He's a dude. He's whatever. He's who, both of those guys were awesome in this tournament. And if they were as good as they looked playing for this international team, all of a sudden, Yukon, to me, their ceiling goes to an entirely different level in 2025, 2026. So let's go ahead and dive into both of these guys. First of all, Eric Reiba, as I said, 7-foot center, played for Germany's national team. Interesting player because I know I just said it, but I'll try not to repeat myself too much here. But, he played ball in the U.S. He was a McDonald's All-American. So I'm not going to sit here and lie and be like, oh, this is the biggest surprise that has ever happened in the history of basketball, okay? But he was really good for Team USA, or Team Germany, excuse me. Averaged 15.5 points, 5 rebounds, 59 or so % shooting, was really good around the rim, kind of quick feet, soft touch, all the things that you want to see from a 7-foot center. And again, I know he played in the U.S. and was a McDonald's All-American, but I thought he asserted himself well. I thought he played with confidence. I thought he got better as the tournament went on. And I just thought he was just better than I was expecting. Now, the one that was definitely better than I was expecting was Furphy. Okay, so he was, Yukon fans, correct me, I believe he was the first player that actually committed in the class of 2025. Braylon Mullins, Reiba, a couple others commit afterward. But he was just a guy, he's from Australia. You don't really know what to expect. Well, he comes into this tournament and he starts off with a bang. 24 points against Team USA in the opener of the tournament, 24 against the Dominican Republic later, 16.5 points in the tournament, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2 steals. He's just kind of a do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades guard that kind of did a little bit of everything. He was a scorer when he had to be. He was a playmaker when he had to be. Great defensive player. And I just didn't think he was that good, and I did not have expectations for him going into this tournament or for Yukon next year. And so you flash forward. You add those two to what we already know that Yukon has. I think it's going to be a very fun season for Dan Hurley and the Huskies ahead. And transparently, I just think they're going to be flat out better than I think a lot of people are expecting or a lot of people realize. Because the bottom line is, and we've talked about Yukon pretty much on and off since what? Early April when their season ends against Florida in the round of 32. Season didn't go to plan, but we talked about all the retention, why it was important, and why the Yukon Huskies this offseason were going to be defined by retention going into the 2025-2026 season. Well, they get Solo Ball back. All Big East second team, 14 points per game, 41% three-point shooting. He was one of the most improved players in college basketball this year. I think he has like first-team All-American type talent if it comes together in the offseason. I think we've talked about this before, maybe in the offseason grades, but, Yukon does a great job with social media. He seems to have taken on a vocal leadership kind of role. He's kind of been a guy who's been a leader by example. Now it seems like he knows, this is my third year in college basketball. I'm the man. It's my moment, and I think he is ready for a breakout year. Alex Karaban's coming back. Listen, we know it was a disappointing year for Alex Karaban. Not all of it was his fault. Got the concussion early. I think it took him longer to recover than I think a lot of people maybe realize kind of publicly. I don't think it was talked about as much. The role kind of changed throughout the year. Liam McNeely's playing well early. He gets hurt. He's out for a month. Karaban's got to be the guy. Then he's not the guy. They don't really have that true point guard. So I think now that the roles are more defined, I think he'll be improved. Terrace Reed, we've talked about it again. A dude that basically was a dominant low post player the final probably 2-3 weeks of the season. Keep going back to that 24-point, 18 rebound, 6 block performance against Providence late in the year. So those are your core three. Jalen Stewart, I think, is due for a breakout year. Jaden Ross comes back. I think he is due to be much improved. And then again, it was defined mostly by those returnees as well as those guys that you added early in the offseason. Silas Demery Jr. comes in from Georgia. He's that big point guard that Yukon was desperately lacking last year. He's going to step into that role. I think he's going to be great. Was maybe Georgia's second best player last year on a tournament team alongside Asa Newell, who of course was a first-round pick this year. Well, he's going to be around much more talent at Yukon. I think his skills are going to be accentuated. Malachi Smith, who I know is out with injury right now, is probably going to play that sixth-man role. Braylon Mullins, Dan Hurley has already said, I expect him to be a one-and-done. And so I bring up all those names. Ball, Karaban, Stewart, Ross, Terrace Reed, and then Braylon Mullins, Silas Demery, and Malachi Smith, because that was supposed to be the core. And kind of anything after that you got was just icing on the cake. Again, maybe Ryba you expect a little bit from because he needs to be that backup 5-man, but I don't think anybody went into this tournament being like, he's going to be a 15-point per game scorer in this tournament and play as well as he did. And then again, Furphy. We're talking about Furphy as one of the better players in this tournament. And I think as the tournament went on, he kind of wore down. He had to play a bigger role for Team Australia, But he's supposed to be like your 9th or 10th man that you're just not really expecting anything from. And that dude is dominant for Team USA. And so I just bring it up because you add those two. You get from them what you got in this tournament. It's a wrap. I mean, that all of a sudden makes UConn that much deeper, that much more talented, that much less of a drop-off when they go to the bench. It is a total game changer. And so it's funny because I tried to consider everything when doing my way too early top 25. I had UConn at number 7, and I basically had him at number 7 under the assumption that, that core 7 or 8 guys that I said, with Ryba being the backup 5 and Furphy just not even being a factor. Well, now if Furphy's giving you 10, 12, 15 minutes and he can really contribute, which it looks like he's going to be able to do, total game changer. If Ryba can step in and there's no miss off of the, Terrace Reed when he comes out of the game, total game changer for UConn. So I'll tell you what, I think of every team in this event, you could argue Louisville's a huge winner with, Louisville is a huge winner with Mikel Brown Jr. Dybantsa looked as good as advertised. I don't think anybody was a bigger winner than UConn, who all of a sudden now just has 2 dudes that you kind of weren't really expecting that much from, who all of a sudden have a chance to be really special this year. And then, the way college hoops goes, you never know, but could be there for 2-3 years and be real impact players down the road.